this is Liz Larson. I'm back with some basic cake decorating designs. So today we're working again on stencil designs. I'm also going to combine that with a cake that may work for Christmas or for any man. It's a great masculine cake, and I'm going to show you how to do pine cones. So let's get started. I've just taken a piece of parchment and I've drawn a design, a diagonal across what's going to be a half sheet cake, just some arches. Very simple. And then I'm going to cut that out. The nice thing about cutting your own stencil is that you have both sides, the positive and the negative side. And you can decide which side to use. How you decide is which side do you want white and which side do you want color. Today we're also going to use an airbrush to lay down the color. You could use your stencil to wipe icing over it, or use no color at all. Just use the stencil to make an outline on the top of your cake by tracing it out. So for this design I am using a silk screen. This is a silk screen, it's just a screen stretched with some silk, and the reason is that my cake is iced in a whipped topping, which is very fragile. If you are using buttercream, you don't need a silk screen. If you don't have a silk screen and you want to use one, you can also get some tulle or some very fine netting at any fabric store. So that just goes here on the top of the cake. It's to keep my stencil from sticking. Here's my stencil. And I'm going to kind of center it in my cake that way and fire up the airbrush. So for this design, I've decided to use red so that we can also use this for Christmas. If you're going to do it for just a man, putting green down or blue below is really effective too. So let's get started with the airbrush. With parchment, you really have to hold it down or it'll move on you. And I'm going to aim the airbrush at my stencil and just let it fill in. I'm about 6 inches away. Just going to let it fill in. I'm going to use this stencil for kind of a garland effect, since we are going to use this one for Christmas. And then I'm just going to give it a light spray to fill in behind it. But the concentration of my color is up close. You see, I'm just moving the airbrush back and forth very lightly and very even. Now, I'm not too worried about the edges being perfect because I'm going to go ahead and put a border with them. Looks like my stencil stuck just a little, and I'll fill back in. You don't have to be worried about that. Since we are going to use this for Christmas, I want to show you a technique with the airbrush that's a little more advanced. You want to get a little bit closer, not too close, maybe 2.5 inches, and actually lay down your spray with your airbrush. I'm going to use my airbrush to give a light spray down the side. Again, for this I'm about 6 inches away, and I'm aiming towards the board to get this effect, right where the cake and the board meet. Grounds my cake, also gives me a little bit of peekaboo color underneath. Now if you don't have an airbrush, you can also use some Wilton spray colors. You're not going to be able to get this fine of detail, but you're definitely going to be able to use that. So just about anybody can use this technique. Let's get started with our borders. So the idea of a stencil is to use it as a guide and as a framework for the rest of your design. I'm going to use a garland technique here. Even pressure control, thin at the ends, thick in the middle. Very quickly, I'm filling up a lot of space across my cake. because this is a little bit Christmas, I'm going to give it a little bit of maybe a little Christmas ball there. Now, you can use any tip you want to create your edging along here. Now, I did mention before, but it's a good time to mention now, that you always put your airbrush down first. Use your stencils before you put your borders. Let's continue on with just a really pretty double reverse shell. Now, if you're doing this one for a man, you might want to use a braid or just a straight shell. The thing about creating quick designs is to use the borders that you know, just in different combinations. You could use this stencil for a woman's cake, for a wedding cake, for anything that you want, just combining different colors and different borders. So I want to create a nice round border for this. I'm going to use just a reverse shell and a large C, and see how I get all the way up the side of the cake. Kind of mimics snowdrifts or maybe even a sleigh. But with this border, I really don't have to do anything else on the side if I don't want to. If you're a beginner and want to learn how to do the basics for some of these borders, watch the borders video on this channel. So I said we were going to do pine cones. I've taken a parchment bag here with a number 104 writer, number 4 writer, and I've striped the bag with really dark green. And then I'm just going to fill that bag in with a lighter leaf green icing. This is going to give us a variegated pine cone foliage. We're basically going to create nettles. So for pine cones, we want to use pine needles, and I'm going to follow along the spray that I've already laid down. Now, if you don't have an airbrush, you can do this with your number 104 writer, number 4 writer, excuse me, which is some color. So I'm going to start with my longest tine here, and I don't want to go right on, just to the side here. Start at the bottom, and I'm basically using a zigzag method. Larger to a point, and then back down. And you can see that my dark green is starting to come out. Now, if you don't want to use this design with pine cones, and you just want to use this large spray, it would be okay to do that too, and just use a few roses. With these designs, the great thing is that just about any combination of borders and flowers is going to look great. So I'm adding another layer right on top and off to the side. And you can see now that just a little bit of my under design is showing, and that's okay too. And one more here. And back down. Now you can continue on with as much of this pine cone foliage as you wish. I'm just going to use one more here for balance. So for my pine cones, I also want some variegation too. I'm going to just take my bag that I use for my borders and go right up the side, because I want my pine cones to have a white tip, look a little frosty for our Christmas design. Then I'm going to take a really dark brown and go right up the side next to it, and then my pre-mixed lighter brown to fill in. When you're using striping, you want to squeeze out till you're kind of at the color you want to start with. Now, pine cones employs the same method as piping a rose on a stick. So if you're not familiar with making flowers on a stick or a skewer, watch our piping a rose on a stick video. This has a very similar petal to a rose, but smaller. And also, instead of making a cone in the middle as a rose, we just start with the first 3 petals. So 1, 2, and 3. And you can start to see the variegation there. and see how high up. So this is very similar to doing a rose on a stick, except we're not going to use the cone for a rose. We're just going to use the first 3 petals. It's a squeeze, let it build and release. And you can see our variegation is starting to come out there, and we're way up on top of the straw. And then we just want to continue around with our pine cones. We want to try as hard as we can not to create a pinwheel effect. And we do that by making sure our petals are nice and straight up and down. As you can see, I'm using my straw to get up under here. And we're getting lots of nice variegation. Pine cones are usually good at 5 or 6 layers, but they really can be as big as you want them to be. Now, here's the tricky part. Getting them in our cake. And hold the straw about like this, and here, and cut. Get up under with your scissors, and push it down into your cake at an angle. Now, I don't want to get a bunch of comments about if people are going to eat the straws. These are nice long straws. They come out easily as the cake's being cut. And if you have people that are eating that long of a straw, I think maybe you need to invite other people to your party. And I'll do this again quickly. We're going to use 3 pine cones. You always want to put any flower down in 3s. It's a good balance. Good for the eye. And you can see I'm using the second half of the straw. And one more. So with whip topping, it tends to get a little stiff and even a little chunky. And as your buttercream sits out, it'll also do the same thing. I like this effect for the pine cone because it makes it a little bit pokey, a little edgier, and less flowerier. Flowerier, I think that is a word. For any of you who aren't sure, look it up. So we want to balance out this cake. I'm going to put some pine cone needles here to make it look a little more like a Christmas garland. And these make a great accent. Oh, any little spot around the cake that you think could use it. And remember here we're just using a little zigzag, larger at the base, smaller at the top. And I think that this cake could also use just a little bit here in the corner. See my nice variegations coming out there. And I put one more pine cone in the corner. This one I want to make smaller, so maybe only 3 tiers of petals. They're not really petals, but I'm not sure what else to call them. If you happen to be a pine cone expert, tell us what to call them, please feel free. So we're going to add just a couple of holly berries in here, just to squeeze around little circles. Also always in 3. I'm going to add one on each side here, which gives me 3 for balance. I'm going to use this as the top of the cake and this is the bottom, so I'll use my writing this way. Nice tall letters. And careful to keep your arm out of your pine cones. And happy holidays. We need an S. There we go. I hope you enjoyed this design using stencils and pine cones. Remember, stencils can be combined with any border, any flower to make a great design. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.